Hi everyone, welcome back to Babbling Irons. And myself, Sloth, and baby Austin with us today. Sloth, we've had an interesting development at West Ham today. Graham Potter, who we were all told, for all intents and purposes, will not be leaving West Ham until the international break, has been sacked. It's a bit of a surprise because, as I say, we all expected him to go after the Arsenal game, but something must have happened overnight because quite frankly, we are quite now sitting here with no manager and going into the game on Monday without Graham Potter. The obvious news is that we're looking at Nuno Espírito Santo to come in to replace him, but it's all just quite a mental few hours, really. So, yeah, Sloth, if it's possible, with your dad brain right now, can you even just have any level of kind of idea of what the hell is happening? Because the circus seems to be well and truly rocking up again at West Ham.
Well, I think those with a keen ear amongst you may well have noticed that Austin has perfectly summed it up. He's just pushed and filled his diaper. So I think he's rather summed it up well with the fact that it is a bit of a hit show at the moment. And I think when you look at the fact that the decision has clearly come from someone else, because West Ham don't sack managers. They often wait for them to their contracts expire, or they can part at the end of the season and go their separate ways with very little fee paid. Now, I think the fact that we've done this, and as you rightly said, Arsenal was apparently going to be the game that we would sack him if that was going to happen. I think it suggests that not only is this a decision led by other parties at the club, possibly other shareholders, but also one that is maybe a sign of where the club's faith is in the person making those decisions. Because overall, this is decisive. It's 5 games into the season. It was a quick decision. We've cleared out the coaching staff very quickly. We've appointed Nuno Espírito Santos very quickly, by all accounts, and that is not very West Ham at all. If we are going to do something like that, normally we've got Nuno Espírito Santos sitting in the stands for a few months before we decide to do anything. So this doesn't feel very Sullivan-esque in its business, and I think that maybe this is led by someone else, and perhaps a question of investment overall into the club if this was not made decision-wise.
Yeah, I totally agree. As you say, this is very much not Sullivan-esque. We know the Sullivan idea was to give him at least till Arsenal, because those 2 games weren't winnable. Unacceptable for the board to have that. That just tells the players everything you need to know about West Ham's level of ambition, because it's we just give up on games. And that's at board level. How can you expect the players to have any level of commitment when the board are already going, we're giving up on this one, we're giving up on that one. Don't worry about it, lads. Just rock on up to the next one when we get a new manager. But the fact, if you mentioned decisive, I agree to a point, but a true decisiveness would have been Monday, get rid, and then spend the week to find the manager and maybe announce them on Thursday, Friday, at least so they could have had a training session in place. I would be very, very surprised to see Nuno in the dugout on Monday. I think it'll be announced today, quite frankly. But as you say, it's not in keeping with David Sullivan, because David Sullivan, I have no recollection in his entire time of being in football of ever having a caretaker manager involved for a game. So to do this, would insinuate to me that something major happened overnight. And I don't think Nuno agreeing to a contract would have been that major decisive event. I think, as you pointed out rightly, I think this is maybe a shareholder conversation, and this is a forced position that this happens now, or maybe funding is not happening elsewhere. But yeah, now we're left in this position. We were going to Monday night, managerless, rudderless, directionless. Yes, we have Nuno likely coming in today, but still, he's likely to be able to come in today or tomorrow, have a meeting with the players, but that's about it. There's going to be no imparting of tactical knowledge, kind of stance or anything like that. It's going to be done. There was an opportunity in which to have had this sorted by probably Tuesday, Wednesday, at least giving Nuno a couple of days with the players to then kind of instill some messages to them. It's nuts, and yet this is a valid point. Potter did only have one training session. However, this is Saturday. A training session, if anything, is going to be incredibly light tomorrow. So I wouldn't really say that is going to be the case. And it's a very good point here about Nuno, relying on a solid defence. This is something that I brought up in a group chat when there was lots of talk about, let's get Nuno, and I made a point of, for me, it's fundamentally doesn't suit a Nuno team because it rests on that incredibly solid defence, which we've clearly shown over the last season and the season before. This is not a solid defence. Under Moyes, that's the most goals we conceded ever as a defence, and we've added one player to that, in Kilman, who is, unfortunately for himself, is flattered to deceive. Played with Nuno before, so maybe there is some light at the end of the tunnel there. But what do you say around that aspect? That is the team suited? If you was to go through the spine of the team, do you think there are the constituent parts that he could piece together in which to have a Nuno team, or do you think he's really going to need proper backing in January, probably to get minimum one centre back, and I say minimum one centre back, and a minimum of a centre forward for Nuno to have arguably the fundamental base that he needs in which to build on and to try and keep the team up?
I think what we're lucky is that we've got a keystone of Nuno's style down, which is the wing backs and the wingers. I think Kyle Walker-Peters, even Aaron Wan-Bissaka, if that is the direction Nuno chooses to go, they are good, strong players who will create, and Somerville and Bowen are going to be massive in a Nuno system. And I know people like to say, oh, well, Nuno might not necessarily get the best out of Bowen. Well, I'm sorry, if you can get the best out of Callum Hudson-Odoi, you can get the best out of Bowen, who is a much better winger and may not have the blistering pace, but will give you the pace, work rate. And
he took Elanga up massive levels, and I don't think Adama Traore either has been the same player since he's moved away from Espírito Santo. So I think that's two right wingers that he is taken to an exponential higher level, even though they are traditional right-sided players. But he has taken those two wingers to a level I don't think they've probably had elsewhere as yet.
No, I completely agree. I think the big issues that we're going to have is that the midfield is a real struggle at the moment. However, he is going to also remove one of the biggest issues in that midfield for us, because he's not a big fan of James Ward-Prowse. So as soon as James Ward-Prowse is dropped, I think that midfield is going to look completely different. I'm not saying that he's going to play Kante. I'm not saying he's going to immediately play Potts, but I do think that he's going to make a change which drops James Ward-Prowse from the side, and that is going to make a huge difference to this starting 11, because he is completely and utterly useless at this level for what is needed. And I think if we can get in a centre mid to get a bit more depth. I know Nuno wanted Magassa at Forest. That was one of the things that was frustrating him. He wanted Magassa, and we saw Forest made a couple of bids for him as well. Didn't get him. He came to West Ham, and I think Nuno will be really happy with that. So Magassa, then you look at Fernandes and potentially Paqueta in that midfield. That's a 3. That is a good 3 when they're fully fit. And I think if we can get to January,
and you can argue as well with Fernandes or Fernandes, probably it's probably pronounced, would replicate the Elliot Anderson type of player. Obviously, you've got Magassa, which will very much take that Sangare, kind of Dominguez kind of role, that maybe that defensive solidity and good getting around the pitch. Obviously, Crystal Palace game, he was awful. Let's don't get around that.
Yeah.
However, I don't think that was a fair example of the player. And yeah, Potter again, Paqueta is not like Morgan Gibbs White because it's more pace than Gibbs White, and I think he's more direct and more of a goal threat. However, he does have that ability to unlock games and to, given the freedom, we may see the Paqueta that we saw in a good, really solid 6-month period under David Moyes, where he was, quite frankly, an incredible player for us before it kind of curtailed and obviously all of the noise around the allegations over the betting and so on kind of started to impact his performances.
I think the big issue is going to be the goal scoring element and the fact that we just don't have a striker who suits how Nuno plays. You know, Wilson is a very smart striker, and Füllkrug provides the physicality that we know Nuno likes. However, he just does not have the pace to cope with the Premier League. He does not have the ability that we've seen to physically intimidate any Premier League defenders that we've seen so far. You know, it's a shame it's not working out. I really hope Nuno can do something with Füllkrug, but I think if you gave him the chance, he would go out and get someone like Durasinmi, who will be in the last 6 months of his contract in January, get him from Victoria Plitzen, big, physical, quick striker who will cause problems and give our attack a bit more pace.
If only we'd got Christian Uche, because that would have been
Christophe Uche would have been perfect.
It would have been perfect, absolutely perfect.
Again, I think if we're looking at a midfield 3, I would not be surprised if he does play Kante a little bit, Kante, Magassa, or someone like Potts, and I think that has been one of the major issues in our midfield. I also wouldn't be shocked if he does actually just put Souček at centre back. I know it's not not necessarily something Nuno does where he changes the positions of players, but I do think that when you look at what we need, and what we need, very clearly need, is someone willing to stick their head on the end of any sort of aerial threat. Souček is one to do that. And
something I've said to you many times as well, I think it's probably the revelation position. I think we can get a lot more out of Souček there. I think he struggles with his feet as a midfielder, but in defence, I think then he'll have very good feet. He does have a range of passing. He can pass out. Like I said, we'll put his body on the line and we'll hit his head onto absolutely everything. He can lead. I think he probably would be that player who can go in the middle of 2 centre-backs and actually pull them together and get something out of them. You know, it's a means to an end. And if Souček wants to continue playing at West Ham, I personally think that's his best route to continue playing at West Ham, because I don't think he is good enough in midfield. I don't think he's a good enough number 10. I don't think he's good enough number 6 or 8 in that respect. When I look at the other players, he's so damn effective for West Ham, and that's why it's so incredibly difficult in most cases to actually think of the unfathomable idea of not having Souček, because he has been and has been so vital for West Ham over the years for us.
I agree. I think that he's going to be a really interesting prospect to see what Nuno can do with him, because, you know, there's a reason he is the captain of Czech Republic, and it's because he's a leader. Now, I think James Ward-Prowse has to be dropped from the starting 11, and Nuno will do that. Like, fingers crossed Nuno does that. I agree with Carl, though. I think it's a real shame that Potter didn't go sooner, just so Nuno could get a bit of coaching with the current squad under his belt, and at least kind of we stop this entire circus of face swaps. Because look, it's funny, it's been very entertaining, and I think if anything, it will mean that Potter's kind of left on decent note with the fans, because I don't like him being thrown under the bus. It's not his fault he's failed. It's only one person's fault, in my opinion, because Graham Potter has not had a chance to build his West Ham. You know, he's been dealing with another manager's squad. He's been dealing with players who, quite frankly, are not good enough to play the way he wants to play. But also, if you look at the players that you can hand on heart say he signed and got transfer fees to spend, you know, someone like Fernandes, then Fernandes has been a success. He's done well. So if you'd also said to him, okay, here's £50 million to build a bit more of a squad. You're going to go out, you're going to do that yourself. Show me what you can do. He's not had that opportunity. So while obviously Austin also agrees that Potter wasn't the right man for West Ham, I do think that he has not even had a chance, really. He's been given scraps, and I think that if anything has been shown, it's that investment is needed, and it's not just needed in the coaching staff. It's not just needed in the starting 11. It's needed in the squad, and it's needed in the coaching staff, because this idea that we were going to go out and get Noble, we were going to get James Collins to come in, with all due respect to them, you know, they are not in-demand coaches. They are not proven quality coaches at any level of football. So why on earth we would go out and say these people are good enough for the Premier League, these coaches are qualified enough to coach the likes of Paqueta, Bowen, and do these things, is just quite frankly a joke to me. It's only a West Ham situation, and I say that with all the love and respect that those players deserve as players, but as coaches, it's a completely different animal.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you there, Slav. I think you make a fair point. Potter probably hasn't been given fair shakes, really. That said, he hasn't also produced enough on the pitch in which to give that time needed. And the point raised about Nuno with Kilman, I'm pretty sure Kilman came through during Kilman's time. So Kilman came through during Nuno's time as well, and he was a good player. I remember many at a time, Sloth talking about his like for Kilman at that period as well when he was at Wolves. But the thing that I'm slightly worried about, slightly dubious about with Nuno Espírito Santo is that what I do think he is a better version of David Moyes. I think when you look at his full seasons in club management, every year he's had a full season. He's finished 7th, I believe, give or take, with a club in the Premier League, which is pretty astounding, really, and such a level of consistency. However, it is a bit of a game of attrition. He is maybe a bit more pragmatic and a little bit more on the conservative side in certain aspects. I do believe he wants to try and attack and then they go for teams. And he's very direct in the counter-attacking play. He will look to break very quickly. We saw that with Forest. He does set up his team to do that. And also was the same with Wolves as well. But I do worry that if we are struggling to get results at any kind of stage, because of the likeness to Moyes in some aspects, some sections of the fan base could turn quickly because we're going back to the thing that we tried to move away from, and something that was so, I guess, controversial in the West Ham fan base. Because again, when you're winning in that style, brilliant, absolutely amazing, because you are, backs against the wall, your players are fighting for everything. That gives you a real sense of pride, and when you get the win, it's like, brilliant. Yeah, we deserve that. It was hard fought. We maybe didn't play as well as we could have, or we maybe didn't dominate, but we win all out. But the thing that really gets me is that there was a statement made not even a week and a half ago. And obviously, we gave the presser to Potter yesterday as well. But it's the fact that a week and a half ago, West Ham put out a massive statement, and that statement read, and I'm going to just paraphrase this one little section here. It went as, steps have already been taken to implement a new strategy and approach, particularly in the area of recruitment. We have appointed Graham Potter as our new coach. His role is to build and develop a first team in line with the club's identity and objectives, with a continued focus on integrating young players from our academy. Now, integration of young players, we saw that in pre-season. We haven't seen it in this season so far. And he was a coach that's been brought in to go with our club identity and objectives. So from an identity perspective, I'm assuming they're saying that the identities they want to be more possession based, more in control of games, looking to maybe adopt some of that Brighton approach in terms of building players up from the ground as opposed to going out and buying the ready-made players. And again, new strategy and approach, particularly in the area of recruitment. Now, I highlight that one because we've not even had a summer. We've just about had a summer of that recruitment, which was massively, massively flawed because of David Sullivan. And there's many things that we can talk about that it's not privy to, but we won't go on about it now because it's not fair to the person who told us. But there are many things that he did that curtailed the progression in the summer window. And one of the people at the forefront that we paid £1 million to bring in is likely now to go. So we're going to pay more money to get rid of him as well. So we've set up, a week and a half ago, we made these bold and big claims that we brought in a manager specifically to do with an identity, bringing in a new manager who, not only from a personality perspective, but from a playing perspective, is incredibly different. The identity of the team is going to be nothing short of different. The recruitment, well, that's going to change again because it's a completely different manager, different recruitment style, different types of players needed, different profiles needed, and the person who is the head of that is also being removed and stripped from the position. So we've got to find a new one to go into that role. It just adds, once again, even more of a mess. And as the statement says, it is just a statement that just keeps on giving because there's just so many things within there that are just absolutely nonsensical. It does lead me to the question of, in the area of the new strategy and approach, well, where do you see our new strategy and approach going, Sloth? Because I only see it going in the way of relying on a brand new agent in the form of Jorge Mendes, and which is basically the old model, but just with a fancier name at the front of it. And the identity piece, well, you've completely gone back on yourself to an identity you tried to get away from under Moyes to bring in Nuno, who I personally do believe is possibly a little bit better than David Moyes. Time will tell whether that will be the case for West Ham. But it just, when you look at that statement I made a week and a half ago, especially around the recruitment piece, which we're now going to see is going to basically be dismantled. The new coach has been brought in to instill a new direction and the team is gone. The identity piece, that's gone. Where do you think this even stands? If you was to look at that one segment in itself and look at what's just happened in the last hours, literally hours, 4 or 5 hours, what do you think that even means now when you read that? We knew it's nonsense when it first came out, but it just seems even worse now.
I think it's just PR waffle. There is absolutely no credence in any part of that statement. It's so entirely disingenuous of the summer that has gone before. It is so entirely disingenuous and misleading of any of the Sullivan backing of managers, the Sullivan recruitment policies. There is absolutely nothing in that statement that is true in terms of giving Potter time to build a squad that can play a certain way, changing the style of. There's been no attempt to try and change the style of football in terms of, squad level in a meaningful way. There's been no attempt to do so, and people can say, oh yeah, but we've spent money. We have spent the money that the club generates. We haven't seen any money invested from David Sullivan, and people can go, oh yes, but isn't that the same thing? Well, no, it's the club generating the revenue. He's giving the club money through loans, and he is taking the profit that the club pays him back on the interest in the loans. This is in no way, shape or form a statement that is true. It's not reflective of the club's position in terms of the league or actions, and it is simply a bunch of nonsense that I guarantee you they literally just hired a PR agent to do that. They hired someone with a PR background to type up a statement.
I don't even think
that
that was PR. I reckon they just put in a list of achievements into ChatGPT and went, generate me a statement. Because the fact that the use of hyphens are in the exact same space you would get in a ChatGPT. I wouldn't even think they invested in a PR agency because that would cost money. ChatGPT is free. It looked and read like ChatGPT, and it's even more embarrassing now based on what's happened in the last few hours today.
No, I completely agree, and I think that it's a real shame that yet again the owners are embarrassing the fan base. They're embarrassing the very people who've remained loyal to the club for so many years. You know, I don't think anyone was excited about David Golden Sullivan coming in. Obviously, we were very thankful about the fact that, you know, we didn't just go into financial oblivion. And I am being extremely generous when I say that. I think that is just me giving a tiny bit of credence to the fact that we could well have been a club that ceased to exist. Now, the fact that we have basically gone from a club that was hanging in the balance to a club that is consistently shaking the little cap, going, we haven't got any money, and then saying, oh yeah, but we've got these lofty ambitions, as if we're some sort of Pip esque figure in this Dickens world. Like, it's complete and utter codswallop from every single level of the club's actions. There is not one thing that they have done while they've been here to improve our standing overall. And they can talk about the increase in revenue. That's not down to them. You know, it's just because they basically bent over backwards for the LLDC and Sebco and said, oh yeah, we'll keep the running track because they're spineless. And so that people like Simon Jordan can sit there on the podcast and go, well, yeah, on TalkSport and go, yes, well, it was the deal of the century, and everyone would say yes. Well, no legitimate football owner with an ounce of credibility and ambition for their club would have said, we want that running track. It's complete and utter nonsense, and I think that's what people.
The cynical side.
I think that's what people who are at that level of journalism in football completely misunderstand. And you know, there's also a point that I think, as soon as you look at this statement, you can see completely through David Sullivan's drivel, his inactions, his inability to actually run a football club to any decent standard, build a squad, back a manager, which he's repeatedly shown he cannot do, and also then, you know, carry out any of his own sort of goals that he sets himself. He cannot even do that because he's pathetic and he shouldn't be anywhere near a football club. And that statement sums up his ownership.
But let's be honest, it's not the first statement of that kind, is it? They did the 12-point pledge or promise that they made to West Ham, to which they then, when we called them out as fan base, they wheeled out David Gold because he's the palatable face of the duo, and it was well, we never said promise. They were pledges. So, and they were optimistic in its way that we put it out. Well, one thing that isn't optimistic is the fact that you said that you would put, and again, we're going off a bit of a tangent here, but it's kind of, we'll come back around. You know, the things are saying that we will we'll have a stadium to celebrate West Ham's history. It's been 7 years. Haven't seen a job, haven't seen a thing. All lies, all PR, all mouth. They are, as you like to say, Sloth, all fart, no poop. that is them. And this week, the way they've managed this, and I have quite a level of sympathy for Potter, even from since he started, because they screwed him over in January. They didn't then give him the budget really in the summer. So that budget that they had in January, or should have had in January, then should have been bolted on to this one. They've made a point in that statement of mention, we have no problems with PSR, but we want it to be sustainable, this, that, and the other. Again, all rubbish. You haven't backed the manager. You're trying to subvert the conversation and trying to distract us away from it. He hasn't helped himself, granted, by playing the likes of Ward-Prowse when he's playing Potter or Summer. Potter or Summer, and he hasn't helped himself. However, I also think he has been undermined at every step. And there was a comment I saw here about the Nuno is being pushed by Brady. I would be very, very surprised if Brady is going to have any say in this appointment and whether her view and opinion is going to have any weight in this conversation right now. Now, would she take credit and would they give her credit for it? Oh, absolutely. She would happily take credit for it because if it goes well, then she can say, well, that was my decision. And she will take that credit. It's not that she hasn't done that in the past. But the truth matter is that relationship is slightly estranged at the minute. There's thick as thieves, but it is estranged because Potter was her push and Sullivan apparently didn't want it. And I've heard before quite clearly that he wasn't a fan of Potter, but he did it anyway. And she has been constant face wheeled out during all of this unrest, and she has taken pretty much all the flack while Sullivan hides behind her skirt because that's the type of man he is. The type of man who likes to objectify women, do all of those, but then also hide behind them because he is a deplorable excuse for a human. But that's not the matter entirely. The fact of the matter is, I do not believe she'll have any say in this. I think this would probably come down more to what Kretinsky has been willing to compromise on. There was views that he wanted Silva, but I would assume that he's compromised on Nuno, but the compromise is you can have Nuno, but Potter goes now. I would believe Mark Noble's had a level of say in this as well, because he understands the playing side of things. But yeah, when you look at things at this point in time, it is just an utter mess, and it just sums up West Ham under David Sullivan, the lack of planning, the lack of vision, the lack of any kind of level of competence as well. It's just incredibly frustrating because now we go into this Everton game with no manager in place. What I mean is a manager that's had real time to kind of be the team and to kind of do anything with them and do any kind of tactical training or tactical kind of sets and even be in the dugout. Even if he comes in today, I don't expect him to be there. It's just, again, we could have just removed Potter from this whole situation on Monday. We could have had other members of West Ham coaching and working with them. With the team, we could have completely tried something completely different and just had a game where we didn't have that. Maybe Nuno could have come in, but he could have also then been talking with that team and saying, "Oh, these are the things I want you to work on." At least that could have happened, but it wasn't going to happen with the way we did it. And again, I think it just sums up West Ham's haphazard, reactionary, knee-jerk situations. But I think the pressure is really on the board now because they've made the decision now, and they'll argue it's probably because of fans forced it upon them because of the outrage and essentially the mockery that Potter had all week with the face swap stuff. But it's incredible that they will, when they have to make quick decisions, the fans are always the ones to blame. When they take too long on decisions and it goes wrong, they will never take any accountability. They're always looking to finger point and say someone else is the issue. Now, I hope Nuno does do well. I have reservations because I think, as I said before, the closeness to Moyes in certain aspects, if we do not start winning soon, and we are again seeing 38% possession, not really creating much in terms of goal threat or even scoring or getting the points, I think then that's going to also could turn pretty quickly on Nuno, like it did at Spurs when they started off pretty rocky. So I just think at the moment as a fan base, we are united in some aspects, but massively divided in others. And this appointment could be even more divisive if we do struggle at the start. And I'm just struggling to find anything positive at the moment because I just see in my head, I'm just thinking all the problems that can come down the line at the moment.
No, I agree. I do think that there are some positives in the fact that Nuno is a much better manager than Potter. But I do also think that it's it's shown just how inept the owners are, and that is also a positive because it gives people like Talksport nowhere to hide. It gives people, it gives the wider press nowhere to sort of be able to back the owners without the fans seeing right through it. And I think that's really important because, you know, there's people like there are all these blue tick journalists on Twitter, and they completely get stuff wrong, and they're either disingenuous over the fact that the parting of ways Moyes was a mistake, or they're disingenuous over the fact that the appointments after that have in any way been ambitious, because they've not. You know, they've not been ambitious in the sense that they're going to progress the club. They've just been ambitious in the fact that they're trying to change the style of play for as little as money as possible. And I think that's a good place to wrap it up, because we all want to get behind Nuno. We all want to make sure we see results on the pitch. But I think that as a whole, it's simply not good enough. And things do have to really change from a results-based perspective if Nuno wants to have a future at this club. Because if he struggles, then the fans will there will be more and more reaction to this. There will be more discontent and unhappiness. And I think that will make things even more uncomfortable for the board.
Yeah, I completely agree, Leslov. I think that's a fair point. And, you know, as this says, you know, we potentially could be back to where we are now at the end of the summer, just because of, quite frankly, how things are going. It's going to be tricky. It's going to be difficult. I have reservations about certain aspects around the recruitment, how Jorge Mendes is, I guess, level of involvement that he will have at West Ham, and how the recruitment process that we've started to set up will continue despite Macaulay ultimately getting sacked. And again, I want Espírito Santo to do incredibly well, because again, we're all West Ham fans, and that's the most important thing, is West Ham does well. Even if I don't fundamentally agree with his style of play, it's not really my type of football in many aspects, but I do appreciate that he can be really exciting when we play good counter-attacking football. I just have some reservations about our current structure of our team into which to facilitate that. That said, look, Potter's gone. We all wanted it done, so we can kind of wipe our hands of that situation. Nuno is likely to be our new manager, potentially be announced today or tomorrow at the latest, I would assume. And let's hope for more positive, but more importantly, if you are against the board as much as maybe myself and Sloth and some others are, there are protests coming up over the next set of home games as well. So there'll be a kind of a sit-in, I think, in the Newcastle game, the Burnley game. I think there's going to be a march on the stadium as well. Everton, I think it's going to be the Black Balloons. So as a fan base, if we are against Sullivan and his decisions, we can't let a change of scenery in terms of a new manager, or even maybe positive results, change our stance. We have to continue essentially making our thoughts known that we are unhappy with their running, and that change is not only needed but a necessity for West Ham to move forward. But yeah, that's it for my rantings and our musings on the situation. I hope you have enjoyed, if you can enjoy us ranting. And yeah, everyone who's joined in the chat, thanks, really appreciate it. Really great to see all the comments flying in. And yeah, let us know in the comments as well, for those who are watching this later, what you think in the situation. Do you think Nuno is going to be a success, and so on? But yeah, everyone, thank you very much for watching. Let's hope onwards and upwards from here on out, and 3 points against Everton would be a brilliant reprieve and a brilliant change. So thanks again, everyone. And as ever, Sloth, you know, one last thing to do, and that's come on, you